overwhelmed. So again, welcome to Mid-Year Momentum Fundraising Challenge. I'm Sabrina Walker Hernandez. And a little bit about me, just so you know, I've been in the sector for 28 years. I might as well say 30, but I can't claim it quite yet. 30 years, and I was a CEO for over 15 years, 20 years in the same organization, did operations and served as a CEO. I currently serve on 5 boards of directors, 2 where I fundraise, and 3 where I get the privilege of, both of those are privileges, but I get to hand out money on 3 of those. And so I've seen it from both sides of the house. I have a nonprofit management certification from Harvard Business School. And today what I do is I train CEOs, boards of directors, and employees in leadership skills so that they can increase their revenue as well as their relationships and retention. And so that's a little bit about who I am. And now I'll turn it over to Libby so she can share a little bit about herself.
Thank you. Thrilled to have you all here, just to echo Sabrina. Thrilled to be partnering with Sabrina on this, who I just think is amazing. And so it's an honor for me. I'm Libby Villavicencio, and I go by Libby V because of that last name. When I taught middle school, my middle school students gave me that moniker of Miss V. And so I've been in the nonprofit sector, including my middle school teaching for about 35 years. I started when I was 2. And so I'm not as old as that sounds, but anyway, I like Sabrina, I love helping nonprofits just get, structured and get everything they need lined up so they can achieve what it is they're trying to achieve and fulfill their mission and their purpose. And that gives me a lot of meaning in my life. It's a passion of mine. And so I, like Sabrina, work with nonprofit CEOs, founders, board members on board development like Sabrina, fundraising like Sabrina, and also strategic planning. And I think you do that too.
Yes, yes.
And so I forget how we met, but at some point we met a year or so ago and we just clicked, and I'm thrilled now. This is kind of the first official thing, but not the last that we are doing together. So thank you for letting us introduce ourselves. So please feel free, if you want to put in the chat, your information, right? Your name and your role and your organization and all those things, a link if you want to, and everybody that way will have each other's information if you want to reach out to any one person. We'd like to know a little bit about you as well. So you can put anything else in there if you want to. So feel free to do that.
Yeah, that will help, because you're not in this alone. And the whole thing is we really want to build community. And so day 1, we really sat down and said, how do we want this to look? What do we want you to take away from this? And so one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to talk about mindset. We're going to reset the mind, right? And then we're going to get into some definitions around what is end of year, what is Giving Tuesday, what is goals, right? What are goals? Because somebody said, goal, what goal? We're going to do some warm up of your donors. How do you warm up the donors? Now is the time that you should really be focusing in on that, because you don't want November or December to be the first time that your donors hear from you. That is one of the things that we found that happens a lot. People are not hitting their goals and they're wondering why they're not hitting their goals. But I always look at fundraising like dating, right? You don't go on the first date and ask someone, we're a room full of friends here. You don't go on the first date and ask someone to go all the way, right? So you putting up a post or sending out an email and you haven't said anything to them all year long, you're basically dating wrong. So you really have to look at it like that. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And then we're also going to focus, if it's like dating, and if it's dating and you're dating to build relationships, then how do you do that? We're going to talk about develop your cultivation plan. And cultivation is building relationships. And so that is what our today agenda looks like. And I want everyone to really understand how we're going through this process and what that is going to look like. Okay, so with that in mind, let's talk about mindset shift. Oh, Libby has some housekeeping that she's going to go over.
Okay,
Thank you,
good.
Libby.
Thank you. Just briefly, right? Take care of yourself. So if you need to go get a drink of water or you need to, run somewhere, please, please, please don't feel like you can't do that. We want you to, feel comfortable while you're here with us. It's hard to focus for this long, right? Looking at the screen. And so we're going to try to keep it moving and keep it high energy, but please get up and stretch if you need to. Put questions in the chat and we'll monitor that and answer questions. And just to keep it flowing along, okay? So thank you for that. And just if I could do this really quickly, let's just pause for a minute before the mindset stuff. And we'd like to know why are you here? What made you come here? And why did you commit to spending this time with us? Because you could be doing a lot of other things, I know. And there are probably many things on your to-do list, and it's a Friday afternoon and it's sunny and it's beautiful, right? So what is it that you need? Just put it in the chat, please, if you would, and I'll check that out and sort of summarize it. While Sabrina is talking about mindset. So just take a second, what got you to say yes and sign up for this?
And I'll give you time to reflect on that without talking and interrupting, and we can read some of those comments out.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I like that. I'm a lifelong learner and endeavor to make investments in myself and the organization. Learn more to help me work smarter, not harder, with my 15 hours a week to do donor outreach. Strategic approach to fundraising. Yes, 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 yes. Here because I took a step back from fundraising for June, coming back to it for greater success for Ladder 24. Good. Now's the time. Excellent. Need a workable plan on fundraising and how to form better community relationships. Great. That's a good one. Learning about partnerships, how to activate my board members, and ditto to working smarter. Very new to fundraising, need to raise funds to cover our 2024 budget. Saw Sabrina on a different webinar and I loved her energy and learning from her.
Thank you.
Yes. Looking for dedicated, easy to absorb fundraising training that is better scaled for our size of organization. Wonderful. Motivation and strategic planning for an organization that has not been focused on fundraising. Okay, great. I joined to learn more as fundraising should be a priority, but as a small nonprofit with one full-time employee, it does not get the focus it should, and I'm not an expert and love to learn ways to do it better. Wonderful. Thank you. That is incredibly helpful.
Yes, that really helps us. And we've sat in that seat, right? Where it was just us responsible for fundraising and how do you do it all and how do you manage the board and how do you do this? So hopefully with all our years, we can really help through this process. And so one of the things that I really wanted to focus on, because I think that it makes a difference, is I really wanted to talk about the mindset shift, right? What do we have to do to ensure that our organization, and not just our organization, that we as the person who is working with the board, we as the person who is making the ask, what do we need to know going in, right? And so it's very, very critical that I know several of you said you hadn't reached your goal yet. First of all, you're here, so that is great. You recognize the opportunity that we can share with you and give you some pointers. But the other thing around mindset shift is, and I say this all the time, it's a couple of things. One is you have to feel worthy. And I know that sounds strange, but you really do have to feel worthy of people's donations, right? Because if you're going in with the mindset of, oh, we're just this small nonprofit and it's just us, or it's just me, and we really would like it if you would give, or I just put this post up and nobody gave, so I didn't put it up again, and I haven't really worked on things. That is a mindset, and that's a mindset of a lack of abundance. And so we really have to make sure that we embrace this abundance mindset. We have to make sure that we embrace this mindset of being worthy. And when you embrace that mindset of being worthy, things will come to you. It will be not an apprehension about posting that post, not an apprehension about getting your board members involved in the fundraising, right? It won't be that apprehension. And so one of the tricks that I did with myself, because look, like I said, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. And when I first got into this, I got very nervous around asking for money. But eventually, as I grew into this, I began to realize there's a couple of things. People are generous at their core. They are. Most of us are just stuck at asking for help. And we take it as a personal rejection when people say no. And we cannot take it as a personal rejection. First of all, we have to build up the courage to ask. And one of the things and the mantras that helped me, for those who know a little bit about me, I worked for 20 years with kids. And so one of the things that really helped me when I went into a donor meeting, or every time I posted something asking, it was, I'm not asking for Sabrina. I'm asking on behalf of the kids, because those are my clients. I'm asking on behalf of those kids who are voiceless. And when they say no, they're not saying no personally to Sabrina. They're saying no to the kids. And if they can live with that, then that's fine. And then I also say, if they're saying no, it means no, I didn't spend enough time learning about that donor, and I need to continue to build that relationship. Or it means no, I need to talk to my spouse. Or it means no, not this particular program. But it's never a personal rejection. And so the other thing around mindset, all of us kind of consultants, we kind of travel in circles. And so I have my little whiteboard here. And there was a post that was posted, and I really love this. And it was around, what do you need to go after those big gifts, right? Or what do you need to fundraise? You have to have, one of the things is, the number one is, you got to understand that people are generous. So we're going to write that. We already said that. People are generous. The second thing is and if you can't see this, this helps me as I'm training. So I'm going to say them out loud too. The second thing is, you need to have courage. We talked about that. Courage to ask. But you also need to be adaptable, because if people are saying no, you have to look at, what are you saying? Do I need to change what I'm saying? You have to look at, what am I doing in preparation to the ask? And if I'm not doing anything, what do I need to do? Right? You need to take risk. You have to be in this fundraising game. You have to be a risk taker. So if you don't like taking risk, this is going to be a challenge for you. You have to step outside of your comfort zone. When asking people for money, whether you're sharing that virtually, because I've seen and I've talked to people who say, well, I put up the post and nobody gave. Or I emailed my board members and nobody responded. How many of you have said that? I've said that too. But I had to change. I had to realize that, first of all, not all board members communicate by email, and I had to figure that out. Second of all, when you're on social media, there's an algorithm, and half of the people don't even see your post. So are you using multiple channels? And we're going to be talking about that. You know, you can't just rely on social media. Are you using email list? Are you texting? You have to hit it up on all platforms. Or the best way for me to ask for money is face to face. Now you got to build up the courage to do that. But that's the best. Are you seeking advice? Because there's feedback. So let's say that you have posted the post and you see a lot of people are engaging, but nobody gave. Do you know these people? Do you know your donors? Can you ask them feedback? Why didn't they give? What is that like? It's a continual learning process. And so you have to make sure that you are forever letting people know about your impact, that you are thanking people. Again, it's like dating, right? You go on the first day. This is the best way that I can describe fundraising for myself. This helped me tremendously. It was like, okay, so it's a blind date. So let's say your board members say, I think Juliet would be a good potential donor. And that board member introduces Juliet to that donor, right? Or you saw them online and you online dating, and you say, I think they might be good for my organization, right? So that's a blind date pretty much. Now, when you go on this first blind date again, you're not going to ask them to go all the way, right? Let's just say we're not doing that, right? What are you going to do on this blind date? You're going to ask them some questions. You're going to get to know them. You're going to see if you're on the same page. You're going to decide, do we want a second date? And then you're going to go on that. And if you want a second date, you're like, okay, we're going to go on a second date. We're going to ask some more questions. Those are all your donor discovery questions, right? Well, why did you say yes to this date? What are you looking for? How many? No, I don't want to know how many other people you've dated. I want to know. Why did you say yes? I want to know what your future goals are. I want to know those kinds of things, right? And then if it's going well, you're going a couple of dates and you're doing it. At some point there's a question that's popped. Then we become affianced, right? Because no one wants to date forever. So at some point you have to pop the question. And in this case, popping the question would be, will you consider an investment in my organization? And then once they say yes, you're married now. But the same thing you did to get them, you got to do to keep them. So you got to celebrate anniversaries, right? You got to celebrate birthdays. You have to send flowers just thinking about you. You have to send those thinking about you texts, those phone calls. So when I look at fundraising like dating, it starts to make sense to me. How many of you does that resonate with? Good. So look at it like dating. We're not going to go on this first date and ask anyone to go all the way, because our mindset is we're building a relationship, and in building that relationship and discovering about those donors, posting, sharing our impact, letting them know how great they are, how great we are, and how much that aligns together. That's what we're doing. And as we're going through that, of course, we're going to have some assumptions. Again, we're going to assume that people are generous. We're going to have that courage to ask those questions through that dating process. We're going to be adaptable, because if you're dating and you realize, you know, they're not passionate. We have a literacy program, and we have an art program, and we have this program, and I'm over here talking about literacy, and they're not passionate about literacy. I got to adapt this thing. I'm going to talk about something else, because I've learned that you're going to take risk. You're going to be a risk taker, and you're going to accept feedback. And so as we're going through this, the other thing that I'm going to talk about around mindset is you have to be really willing to, someone said in here that they were a lifelong learner and they love learning. You have to be a lifelong learner, and you have to be willing to invest in this journey. So, and Libby and I tried to make it as affordable as we possibly can. So $27 for the workbook. And I'm gonna say this, out of the 400 and 200, I gotta go check the numbers because they keep growing. Let's say when I checked last, like the 200 people that had registered, I think was like 6, and I think I can name them, who bought the workbook. In my head, I go, I question the mindset, because then I go, so is there, this is a problem that they want to solve, but to solve that problem, $27 is too much to solve that problem. These are the things that I think of as I'm going through this journey of working with nonprofits. And the other thing that I think of, going back to mindset, is you need to understand that nonprofit is a tax designation. It is not a business model. So you have started a business. And if you want to grow your business, right, you have to invest in your business. And so with that in mind, please understand that you've started a business, and whether you invest $27 or $700 or whatever amount it is, you have to invest in your business, because this is a business. And the only way that you're going to grow, and I didn't share this in the introductions, but I took over my organization after a founder that had been there for 30 years. They started out with a zero budget and grew it to $750,000. And from the day that I took it over to the day that I left and retired in 2018, the budget grew from $750,000 to $2.5 million. But guess how much of that budget was my professional development? And not just for me, but for me and my staff and my board. 1%. But 1% of a $2.5 million budget is about $25,000. That's how much we invested in professional development. And it made a huge difference in our growth, because we went on a path of investing in our business. And yes, nonprofit can make money. So this is my soapbox, and I'm going to use it, then I'm going to turn it over to Libby. I'm sorry. This is my soapbox. Nonprofits can make money. It just depends on what you do with that money. So what are some of the things that you can do with the money that you make? You can reinvest it in your programs and expand your programs. You can create an endowment fund. You can have, my goal was always to maintain 180 days of cash reserve. And why? Because if something like a pandemic came along, I could go 180 days without raising a cent and still be able to maintain all of my staff and pay all of my bills and do all of the things, and my kids would not have any interruption in service. What I find a lot is we're not planning for the future. We're going paycheck to paycheck, for lack of a better word, right? And so think about these things. I challenge you to think about these things. And not only that, Libby's going to help us move forward and how can we be successful now this year. And so I know someone mentioned that they didn't have the workbook, so I'm going to drop the link in here so that you can access it if you want it. I just dropped the link in there, and then I am going to turn it over to Miss Libby. And if anybody have any questions of me before I turn it over, please feel free to ask those questions. And
Well,
thank y'all for letting me use my whiteboard, even though you might can't see
okay.
it. I just love my whiteboard.
Yes, that was good. So thank you, Sabrina. That was good. And I want to add one thing because while you were talking, it popped into my head. One of the most compelling things that got me to change my mindset about asking for money was being in some professional development, where the person, the speaker said, you know, how many of you have made a donation in the last few months to an organization that you love? You know, we raised our hands. How did that make you feel when you donated? How did it make you feel? I want to ask you out there, say, how does it make you feel to donate? Good, right? It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. Asking for money is giving the same opportunity to somebody else, to have them make a donation and feel good about supporting the work that your organization does. So, all right. And with that, I'm going to move us on. So, we're going to start digging in now to the guts of this one. Now that you've had that mindset shift, and hopefully you did have some shifting there. So, I like to talk about the annual fund campaign as a part of the overall organization. So we want to just level set with some definitions because a lot of words get thrown around when it comes to campaigns. So there are different types of campaigns. We're focused on the year end, which is part of the annual, but there's also capital campaigns and endowment campaigns. So, your capital campaign is for stuff. It's for a building. It's to renovate a building. It's for equipment. It's for vehicles. It's that kind of thing. And then endowment is, putting your money away in a fund where you only get the interest. You only spend the interest. The amount that gets deposited, it stays the same, and you only draw down the interest, or a portion of the interest that is gained from that. And then the annual fund campaign is where the annual fund campaign, literally the definition of that is just that it's all unrestricted dollars. Sometimes you can restrict it a little bit. I just learned this recently from a consultant that she's not a consultant. She works in a nonprofit, but she does some work with me as a consultant. Anyway, she said, we have program funds in our annual fund, but they're unrestricted because they're not for anything in particular, but people like to give to programs. And so, part of their annual fund is you can give to this program or that program as the annual fund. And it still goes into a pot for that program, but you can spend it on whatever you need for that program. My mind was blown. I always think of annual fund as completely unrestricted. You could spend it on salaries, you could spend it on programming, you could spend it on whatever vehicle saving for whatever you want. And that's the point of it. But I loved that idea of being able to put programs in the annual fund because they prefer to donate to something specific like programs, right? So, we can dig into that more at another time, but hopefully that made sense to you. And then what's the difference between these words? We use all these words sometimes interchangeably in the nonprofit sector. Annual fund versus annual giving versus annual campaign. So here's the difference between these. So annual fund is actually the fund that shows up in your accounting, and it really doesn't have to be like a separate account of money. It doesn't have to be like a separate bank account from anything else. It's just in your accounting that's separated out. It's like, it can even be a line item, but it's like, here's all the money that's in our annual fund. It means you keep track of it and and it goes to a certain place where you know how much money you can spend. A lot of times that comes up in a few ways in your budget, but it often is, covering salaries and overhead, right? annual giving is the act of somebody donating to your annual campaign. The annual campaign is the work that you do to get donations to your annual fund. Okay, so that's everything you do in a year to get those unrestricted dollars for your annual fund. Do those make sense to you? Anybody want clarifying? Anybody need clarification on those? Just let me know in this chat if that made sense to you. Why yes and no? Sabrina?
Yes, I just wanted to also add, because when I was new in this journey, I used to think annual meant you fundraise all year long. That's not what it means. It's a set amount of time. It's just the terminology. So I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure, someone said they were new to fundraising and I just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure they understood that, because I didn't
Thank you.
understand it when I first came in.
Thank you. Yes. And then what's the difference between a campaign, a fund, and an appeal? So to dig in a little deeper, right? A campaign is a set of activities that you do to get donations. It has a beginning and an end. It's all the activities do to raise money for a certain thing, right? Or for the annual fund. So it's the, it can be emails, visits, it can be grant writing, it can be, but it's everything that goes into, and it's usually planned ahead. And you write your email language, you line up who you're going to visit with face to face. You do all the things to plan to launch this campaign that has a beginning and end to raise a certain amount of money. You usually have a goal. You should have a goal. So that's what a campaign is. And then again, the fund is where the money sits in your accounting, right? It's how you account for the money. So if you do a capital campaign, then you have a capital fund, right? Where the money goes into that, and we know how much there is already raised for this project. An appeal is how you ask for the money. It's asking for the money. That can be via email, that can be face-to-face, that can be over the phone, that can be by text, that can be, but it's asking for the money. It's when you ask for the money. Sabrina, you want to add anything to that? All right.
Nope, you were good. Very thorough. Thank you.
Uh-huh. So then Sabrina, I'll hand it over to you to talk about now, where does the year-end campaign fit in there?
Yeah, so where does the year-end campaign fit in there? Let me shock you, first of all. I will say, for me, year-end campaign was never my sweet spot. A lot of people like, what? Yes, no, it was never my sweet spot. Why was it never my sweet spot? Because I was a United Way agency, and with United Way in my community, we still had a blackout period. So our blackout period was from August 15th through November 15th. So that meant, as a United Way organization, we could not raise money or ask for money or do any of those activities during that blackout period. That really challenged us, because from now to that time, that's when you're preparing for your year-end campaign. So that's what you need to be doing now, because if we go back to that dating analogy, right? You should be warming up your donors now for your year-end campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it look like when you're warming up your donors?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like that building of the relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I love to talk about, I think it was, I can't remember who it was, but they said, look, it's just me, and I don't have time, and it's just me. And so this formula that I came up with, I was very much in that situation when I inherited my organization. It was myself and program staff. I didn't have, well, let me be honest. It was myself and operations and a program staff. So I was in charge of fundraising. There was no other, It was nobody else I could put it on. It had to be on me. And not only was I in charge of the fundraising, but in managing the board. And when I inherited my position, and as I was going through, training as the CEO, is my mentor said, there's two things you have to do to be a successful CEO. You have to take care of the board, and you have to take care of the money. Those are the two things you have to do. And so being overwhelmed, because I was overwhelmed, because you can say that, but in the organization where you have staff and you have buildings and you have partnerships and you have all of these other things that are grabbing your time, you feel like you're always putting out fires, and you go in one in a day thinking I'm going to be doing this, and you find yourself doing 20 other things and never got to your list. It was stressful. And so I had to figure out, and being adaptable, which is one of those things, is I had to figure out how can I take what I need to do to be a successful CEO and work it in with the fires and all of that. And so the fundraising process formula was born, right? So it helped me really figure out, where do I need to spend my time for board, for donors, to make sure that I'm taking care of the money and making sure I'm taking care of the board. So this formula really changed my life, right? So 10% of fundraising is identifying. So that's identifying the people who give in your community. And we've established that people will give. People are inherently generous. When Libby said, raise your hand, if you've given, who have you given to? How did it make you feel? We've all have given. I've given. If a little kid comes up and asks me to buy a barbecue ticket, I'm buying it. If I am out somewhere and somebody, I'm doing it. If I can do it, and we all do it every day, all day, most of the time. When you're at the cash register and you're buying your dog food and it says, do you want to donate or upgrade $1 to help, the animal shelter? Usually I do it. So we are generous by nature. So that's identifying who are the people in your community that give. And I do little things. And call me weird, but I don't think I'm weird. I think it's an industry thing. Those of us that are fundraiser, if I go to an event or something like that, and people have like, thank you to our sponsors, I take that sponsorship book because I want to know who's giving, right? If I am not only at an event, I take the sponsorship books. I still like to get Sunday's paper. I don't get Monday through Thursday because ain't much in it. But in the Sunday's paper, people are still doing thank you ads for supporting different events or doing this or doing that. I grab those and I add those people to my list. If I'm in the boardroom with my board members, we're doing the process of identifying who do you know? Who do you know? And so that's how we got our names, or the list of identifying. If you're on social media and you're relying on your social media, who's liking your post, right? That means they like something about your organization. Are you collecting those names in some way? Are you identifying those people? So identifying, that's 10%. And then the other 10% of fundraising process is qualifying, right? Just because they gave to these other organizations doesn't mean they're necessarily going to give to you. Just because they like that post, right, doesn't mean they're necessarily going to give to you. You have to qualify them. And what does qualify mean? Qualify means, does my mission resonate with them? So do they like kids? If you're a youth development organization, do they like kids? If you are an animal shelter, is animals their passion? Are they veterans? Is veterans their passion? Look, you take me, for example. I adopted my dogs from an animal shelter. and my cat, I got 2 dogs and a cat, so I like animals. I'm Army, so I'm a veteran. My husband is a veteran. He retired from the Army. I only spent 6 years. I couldn't do it, y'all. I was done after 6, but he retired. So we're veterans. GI Bill paid for my college. GI Bill paid for my kids' college. I serve on the Museum of South Museum Board. History was my minor in college. I'm a female, believe highly in education. So there's a lot of things that resonate with me. So if you are an animal organization, vet organization, a history organization, education organization, youth development organization, you have a halfway good chance for me to give. But guess who I give to? I give to, and I'm going to be honest, I give to the history organization, and I give to the that's the history organization, and I give to the youth development organization. Why am I not giving to these other organizations? Because they haven't qualified me and they have not asked me. Would I if they asked? Yes, I would. So how do they qualify me? How do they find that out? They have to cultivate. They have to build that relationship. And there's top 6 ways to cultivate your donors. And before I talk about cultivation, I want to say this. And this is look, you're here because you want to know. And we want you to know. You can't just rely on one channel to communicate with your donors. It can't just be social media. There are algorithms. Half of the people that you think are seeing your content is not seeing your content. So it's not just, well, I posted it on social media. You got to do multi-channels. You have to do social media. You have to do emails. You have to do face-to-face. It's a holistic approach. And you're not going to hit a goal if you're just relying on that digital piece. So I want you to know that. So what you have to do is build relationships across those multi-channels. So how do you do that? Because 60% of fundraising is building relationships. Now, all of this is setting up so when we get into the actual hands-on stuff, you're ready. So what does it look like? Number one, the number one way to build relationships is face-to-face. Now, that can be face-to-face, going out for coffee, lunch, doing that if you're in the same community. But this Zoom, especially since the pandemic, is face-to-face. I have worked with people who have done informational tours on Zoom. It's get 10 people to come on. Here's what our organization is about. They're not asking for money. They're educating them on what their organization is about and the impact of the organization. And then giving them an opportunity to sign up to receive their newsletter or to volunteer. It's not even a passive request for money. And this is one of the hardest things for the people that I work with to do. I say, you're not going to ask for money. You're simply going to share your impact. And they will forever want to put at the end of that email or the end of that post, well, you can support our work by donating here. And I'm like, it's not about the money. It's about building the relationship. That's what you need to be doing right now, is building the relationship. So face-to-face, again, Zoom is face-to-face. Phone calls. Are you making phone calls to them? And not phone calls to ask for money, phone calls to check in, phone calls to get advice, because one of those ways to cultivate is seeking advice. Next is Electronic communication. Now that's where your emails come in. Are you sending out a consistent email conversation? Are you reaching out to them via social media? Then you have volunteer opportunities. Are you inviting them in for volunteer opportunities, those hands-on opportunities? If we go back to this dating analogies, this should sound a little familiar with you if you're using that dating analogy, because these are called languages of love, right? Volunteers, quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation. These are also start ringing a bell here. Are you reaching out to them on those phone calls? Those are words of affirmation, saying thank you, we got your gift, or just having a conversation to check on them. All of this connects together. It's inviting them to events. And when I say events, it's not fundraising event. None of this is about asking for money. Events could be a tour of your facility if you happen to be facility based. Events could be having a board member host a house party where they come in and it's a little social event. Are you having a whole open house? Those are the type of events that we're talking about. So that's 60% of fundraising. And then 5% of fundraising is asking for money. So people freak out about the 5%, and I call that the fear of the 5. But if you do the cultivation right, if you build those relationships right, money will pop in your mailbox, or you will start seeing donations on your web page because you're building those relationships. And sometimes you're building them so well, they understand your need, and you don't have to physically say the words, will you consider an investment in our organization? And if you don't believe me, the biggest check that I ever got without asking for money, without asking, but just building the relationship, and I'm going to be honest with you, for me, the biggest, and I'm sure for others it might be bigger, but for me, it was $30,000. That was the biggest that I got from an individual through building relationships, and got the check before I even popped the question, which told me I probably could have got more. But the courage, right? The courage. So check came in the mail. I was very happy with that. So then 15% of fundraising is saying thank you. So this time right now, if you have donors in your pipeline, in your CRM system, and CRM system is that client relation management system, you have them in there and you haven't spoken to them all year, now is the time. Now is the time to invest in that 15% to say thank you. Thank you for the support that you have given us throughout the year or throughout the years. Because of your support, this is what we've been able to do. And you just go on a love-a-thon of thanking from here to November, and that will make a huge difference in your year end. Because people need to hear from you. If they don't hear from you, there's a resentment that builds, and they start to think the organization doesn't appreciate their gift. And I'll give you an example just based on me. So I was a monthly giver at an organization, and I never heard from them. And I was given on a monthly basis to do 2 different organizations, same scenario, didn't hear from them. I felt close enough to the organization. When I got the year end ask, I was offended. I was like, I'm giving to you monthly, and I don't hear anything from you the whole year, and you have the audacity to ask me for more money at the end of the year. I got very upset about it because there was no thanking for the monthly gift. There was nothing, no communication, no newsletter, no phone call, no video, nothing, no card. I got nothing. The next communication was, can you give us more? What do you think? Oh, I already told you I was highly offended. So this is organizations that I value, that I care about. So I picked up the phone and I called the CEOs of these organizations and I expressed how I felt. One organization changed their behavior, one did not. Who do you think I'm still giving to? I'm giving to the one that changed their behavior. Now, and it wasn't complicated for them. Now I get a consistent newsletter once a month. Do I open up that newsletter? Not every time. I'm gonna be honest, not every time, but it makes me think that they're thinking of me. During the holiday, I got a Christmas card. I'm like, that's good enough. Thank you. At least that's an acknowledgement that I'm more than an ATM machine. Both of these organizations got the same information. One responded, one didn't. Did I immediately go in and cancel this one? No, I did not. But what happened is I changed my credit cards. And when I changed my credit cards, of course, the payment stops, you start getting notification. I went in and renewed this one. This one I did not. That's a real life example of not understanding that 75% of fundraising is relationships. How are you cultivating those relationships? How are you maintaining those relationships? And are your donors important enough to you and your organization? We have a big problem with retention in our industry, retaining our donors. And that's because we don't treat our first-time donors, our monthly donors, our repeat donors very well. We get a gift one time, and sometimes we don't even say thank you. And the next time they hear from you, you're asking for money again. How would that make you feel? It does not make you feel well. I see some questions here, Libby. I don't know. I know Andrea has a question, a couple
yeah, I
others.
think that's a relevant question for everybody, right? Do communications to donors need to be individualized all the time, or is it info from the org, impact newsletters, et cetera, sufficient some of the time?
Here's the deal, and Libby, you please answer this as well. With a good email system, you can automate individualization so it feels like it's coming from the organization. But for me, one of the things that I learned along the way, and I'm giving you the best practices that I learned because I was not always doing these things, but I know when I started them, it made a difference. If someone gave to our organization for the first time, we did a first-time donor welcome packet. And that first-time donor welcome packet, it sounds sophisticated. It was not. It was a letter signed by me and the board member. It was a copy of our annual report. And then we gave them like, it wasn't swag. I do not do swag. It was like something that the kids made. It could have been a little picture or something. And then the letter just said, welcome to our family. And so no matter how much they gave, whether it was $5, $500, 5,000, if they were a first-time giver, they got that packet. And so that was in the individualized letter to them.
And
then
can I just
go ahead, Libby.
go ahead. I was just going to say that you've got in the workbook, if you pay the $27, one of the bonuses that you get is a link to a welcome package that Sabrina put together, and you can use that. That's worth its weight in gold and definitely worth $27. So that I think is worth it, well worth it.
And Juliet had a question that was
it's okay.
Juliet had a question that was directed to me, but I want to share it with everyone. She says she got the book, but it said that it wasn't complete. Yes, the book is not going to be complete because we're adding things as we go. But with the Google Doc, you are set up as a viewer. so that when the final, so you can always see the information, but when the final, book is like complete and finalized, we'll send that out as a PDF if you want a copy of it, or you can always make a copy too from the Google
Yeah.
Doc. I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Yeah, make sure before you type into that Google Doc, when
They
you
won't
get
be
the
able
workbook,
to.
download it, right?
Yeah.
Download it, and then you can use it. And then
Yeah.
we didn't want to throw the stuff in for next week until after this session, because you know, we want you to take it one step at a time. Like with you're going to have enough stuff to do with this session, and that's in the workbook. So is it okay if we segue now to like getting to the cultivation plan, or do you
Yes,
want to
I
have
want to make
anything else?
sure I answer Andrea's question
Oh, yeah.
completely. I think I did, Andrea. If I didn't, please let me know. And then Sherelle said, when
Yeah.
having a face-to-face with potential donors, how do you know how much to ask for, and how do we get reoccurring donations? So how do you know how much to ask for? That is a key. That is part of that qualifying and cultivation. So when you are cultivating, you're asking questions, right? You are, and those questions that you ask can give you some type of indication of what their ability is to give. Also, when you're in that identifying qualifying process, you see how much they gave other organizations in that process. And so you'll have a range. But not only that, this is also where your board members come in, because your board members should be people of influence in the community. And so they should be able to give you some insight onto how much to ask for. And then let's go one more advanced. There's such things as donor searches. I've used donor searching databases before when I did a capital campaign, and donor databases will research individuals or zip codes in communities, and they will give you back based on public records how much that the net worth of that person is.
And their giving ability. And I
And they're
really,
giving it.
if you're going to do that, I would focus that on major gifts, and iWave is the best app for that. It's not inexpensive, but it can give you really good intel to help you decide how much to ask for. So,
Okay, Libby, you're
all right.
up.
Okay. Thank you, Sabrina.
Yes.
All right. So, you know, it's harder now than ever to get people's attention, right? Because everybody's distracted and have a million things to do and getting emails from all over the place. But it's important that you continue to do just what Sabrina said, which is use all your channels, send out really relevant information. And I will tell you that you need to understand donor behavior a little bit. Okay, so there's some good donor research out there that Penelope Burke did years ago, and I wanted to share some of that with you, and then make the case for being really good at retaining your donors. I want to reemphasize that, because that, talk about a soapbox, that is one of mine. So the first bit of donor research says that what people want to know before they donate is the following: what is this for? What will be the impact of my donation? Does this organization even need my donation? And will this organization use my money wisely? And will they keep track of it? Okay. So in other words, does this organization have its act together? Okay. And so people want to know that before they donate. Some donors react only with their heart, right? They're just like, oh my gosh, especially, you know, I think we're kindred spirits. We decided, Sabrina, with our animals. You know, if you've seen those, is it the Humane Society with the Alanis Morissette song and the, you know, those puppies in bad situations? It's like, I don't even think about like donate. But, you know, but donors that are going to be asked to give a bigger gift, or maybe even to invest in a smaller monthly recurring donation, they're going to want to know that you're, you know, at least that you are going to manage the money well and use it wisely, right? So it's kind of like, is this a good use of my donation? Is basically what that is. After they donate, they want to know, what did they use my donation for? Did they use it for what they said they were asking me for it for? What was the impact of my donation? And did they know that I donated? That's the first question. Did they get my donation? So you should have a good donor management system that sends an automatic acknowledgement as soon as they donate online. If somebody sends you a check or donate via, social media, you need to make sure they get that right away, because they're going to be wondering, did they get my donation? Did it get to them? Even if they're giving, with a credit card online. And what was the impact of my donation? And are they good stewards of donor monies? Is this organization, are they handling the money well? Do they keep track of it? Do they know what they've got? All those things. So donors need to know that before they'll give again. They won't give again until they are clear on those things. So when you're just asking, they're not going to continue to ask. And here are some sobering statistics too about donor retention. If you're not retaining a good number of your donors, you are losing money with your fundraising efforts. So typically 80% of donors who give a one-time gift to you, not monthly recurring, I'm going to tell you the data on that next. But if somebody gives you their first time, one-time gift, maybe it's at the year end and you ask them to give and they send you $50, right? They donate 50. 80% of them will never donate to you again. Okay, now if you think about it, if that continues to happen, what are you doing, right? Like, you're always trying to get new donors. It's really hard to get new donors. And I'm glad that Sabrina pointed out social media, because social media is not a very effective way to get donations, right? At least right now. It's just not there yet. It's not there yet. But you've got to be really good at the stewardship, the thank you, all that stuff that I just talked about, because you need to retain your donors at a much higher level than 20%. So be really good. And Sabrina, I'm so glad you pointed out. I'm just reinforcing what Sabrina said. It's so important. You know, when you have a first-time donor, you've got to get something to them right away and show them that you needed the money, that you appreciate it, that you're good stewards of the money. And we're going to talk a little bit about a cultivation plan and stuff, but those are important things. Monthly recurring donors retain at a much higher rate. Monthly recurring donors retain not just 20%, 60% of monthly recurring donors will stick with you. For the average length of time a monthly donor sticks with you is 7 years in the US. It's absolutely the best fundraising you could do, getting monthly recurring donors. So get good at that. Okay. And I love that also, Sabrina, that you said, I don't do swag, because I'm telling you right now, don't do swag. I made the mistake early in my career of thinking that I needed to take gifts to my donors and things like that. And they were like, I had one donor that was like, why are you giving me this thing? You are using my donation to buy this thing. I do not want you to use my money to buy this thing, right? I don't know how many of you remember this is dating me, the old NPR fundraisers, National Public Radio fundraisers, right? They would do those. And they we'll send you a coffee mug and a pound of coffee and a t-shirt or whatever if you give $100. But they always ask, do you want that? Do you want to get that or not, right? And I always said no, because I wanted them to get all my money, right? I wanted them to have it all. And I didn't care about, don't we all have like 50 coffee mugs in our cabinets? And so donors that are savvy and might become major donors, giving a big gift, a 5-figure gift, they don't want you to spend their donor money on swag. So love that too. Okay, let's get to the cultivation plan, because time's winding down here really, really fast. In the workbook, you'll have access to, I mentioned the welcome package, but also a list of different engagement strategies. Engagement is the same interchangeable word for cultivation. But right now, I would like us to sort of generate some ideas, and you can unmute or put in the chat. What are some things you think would be good ways to cultivate? Sabrina mentioned a couple: newsletter, welcome package, what volunteer stuff. What else would be a good approach to cultivation? What do you think would be good to do to cultivate? If swag is donated, your donors still don't know it's donated. They don't. They have no idea. And so unless you tell them, unless you say like, if you tell them, that's one thing, right? But I'd be careful about giving anything that's of much value at all. If it's something that might be marketing your organization, like something simple, like a refrigerator magnet or something like that, something that's mission focused. I love the idea of like something the kids made, right? I work with an early learning childcare center, and they do send out, like, they get photocopies of kids' artwork, but that's mission central. People are then going to have a feeling about, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I donate to this organization. Look at this little piece of kids' art, right? So just be careful with the swag stuff.
Yeah, I'll echo what Libby's saying too, because I had the exact same conversation with a donor. They were like, don't use my money for that. And that's why I kind of learned that. That's why I said I didn't always know that until I had a major donor. I mean, they were giving at a significant amount, and we thought, oh, we're gonna take this little plaque or we're gonna do this. And they were like, no, they cut it really quick. So
Yeah. And that is, so yeah, if you're telling them, Marianne, I think that's fine, that a company, donated some decals, which I think is great, right? That's a small enough, and you also want to be careful about like your materials, which isn't as relevant today as it was when I was first starting in my fundraising career. Where we would do a really slick, expensive annual report that was printed on thick paper with lots of color, and it was glossy. And some of my donors balked at that too. Like, really? How much did you spend on this annual report? So you just want to be careful how it looks. What are some ways to cultivate donors? Do you have anything that you would think about as far as cultivating? Maybe it's something we already said. That's okay. But what would you do to sort of engage your people who are either have already donated or are prospects that you would like to get them to donate? And you can say it or you can put it in the chat. Any ideas? Or what have you done? How many of you have a newsletter, for example? And you don't have to have a newsletter. I'm not saying I'm advocating for newsletters. I'm saying it's one way. Coffee meetings, great. I think that's great. Updates, yep, you can send updates anytime. Yeah, newsletter. A list of upcoming events, great. Good, keep them coming. This is wonderful. Awesome. You're moving location, so you'll be planning an open house. Love that idea for the new location. Ask them to volunteer. Absolutely. If they get, the closer they get to the mission, the closer they get to the actual work, the more committed they will be to your organization. We invite donors to special behind the scenes events. We're a performing arts org, so first rehearsal, opening night, love that. One-on-one meetings with your major donors, love that. Great, these are all good, thank you. Newsletter, impact report, special surprise and delight opportunities for our monthly donors, like a discount in our store, donor appreciation events, tips on self-care and mental health. We're a mental health organization. I really love that. That's great. Ask them to come on air on the community radio and be a guest DJ. That's fun. That's creative. Be careful. Have you had luck, Katina, with your donor appreciation events? Because I also find that donors will passively resist them. If they don't actively say to you, no, I'm not going to come to, like, I don't need that recognition, then sometimes they will passively just not attend. So I'm anxious to see if you've been able to pull that off of having donor recognition events. I have found them challenging, but I might have been doing them wrong. Oh, they come to your event because you have local bands. Love that. If it's more like you're just inviting your donors to come to the event, right? Versus saying we're going to be recognizing you. I think that's better. Wonderful. I think that's great. Okay, good. Um, just to give you some other ideas, and again, the workbook has these ideas in there, and so you'll have access to those too. So a couple of ideas, right? You hit most of them. Video is incredibly effective. So even if it's just a thank you video from a board member or you, just a quick like 30-second, just popping into your inbox to say thank you for that donation that you just made. We really appreciate it, blah, 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 right? You could hold informational sessions, either virtual or in person, just to talk about the organization and goals and things that you're proud of and all that stuff. Lots of personal touch points. You could share your impact. You could send like a brag. You could brag about, do you have a certification? Are you a candid, certified bronze level, gold level, platinum level organization? You might want to brag about getting those or awards or when you're recognized or share a news article. Tell them how you're good stewards. Tell them how you manage donor money. You could even put that into a newsletter or slide it into an email somewhere where you just talk about how you are frugal with your money, you manage it well, your board looks over your financials regularly. You make sure that you keep your donor money separate and you keep track of everybody's donations and all those things. They're going to see some of that when you send them like a thank you and an acknowledgement and a receipt. Or when you send them, one of the best things you can do is, I don't know how many of you do this, but a donor database will help you easily do this, is in January, send them a tax receipt that has their total donations for the previous year as they're preparing for their taxes, right? And in the workbook also is something that Sabrina stuck in there, which is a great training on the top 6 ways to cultivate donors, which she mentioned those 6 ways, but now you have access to the training on that. So now, here's the question, right? Let's build a cultivation plan. We want you to build your cultivation plan. So here's what we want to know. What are some things that you are going to do between now and Thanksgiving, let's say, around there, mid-November? What are you going to do to cultivate, engage, warm up your prospects, donors, to increase the odds of them donating? What will you do? So jot that down. If you have the workbook, you can download it and write in there. But otherwise, just jot it down. Have a piece of paper, pencil, get your computer out, whatever it is you want to do. What are you going to do to warm up your donors?
And can I challenge people? I
Mm-hmm.
want to challenge you to at least come up with 5 touch points between now and then, and not just you as the CEO or the development director, but you as a team, meaning board members, CEO, development director, if you have them. How's your team going to touch between now and November? At least 5 touches.
Good. And if you feel like sharing those, we'll ask you to share them in a minute, okay? Because you learn from each other, right? Sabrina and I don't have all the answers. We try, but we don't. Nor do we have all the good ideas. You have good ideas. You have those too. Take a couple more minutes. Oh, I see something in the chat. I'm excited. hard with a very interactive board. They are just title holders, so it's hard. Yes, yes, it is. You are right, Marianne. That is a big challenge. And something that I know both Sabrina and I do a lot of work on with nonprofits is getting the boards highly engaged, so much so, and setting them up for success.
So can I ask you a question around that as everybody is still writing? Are your board meetings in person or virtual? I can't see the comment. So.
In person.
Okay.
I'll watch the chat for you.
Perfect, in person. So this is what I want you to do to get your board members engaged in the relationship building process, which is a huge part of fundraising. Your next board meeting, I want you to go in with pens in your hand, all the same color, believe it or not, it matters. And I want you to go in with note cards in hand and a script. I want you to pass out 2 note cards to each board member and an ink pen with that script. I want you to tell them to write that script in their handwriting on the note card, preferably if the note card has your logo, great, but if it doesn't, it's fine. And then I want you to tell them to sign it. Do not address it to anyone. Do not address it to anyone. Write the script. They don't have to think. It's in their handwriting. Sign it, give it back to you. Now, when you go to your desk, you can use those note cards to send those handwritten board thank you cards to either donors that just came in so they can get them within 24 hours, or you can send them to your top donors. Now, what you're going to do with get your pens back is you're going to write the donor's name, and then you're going to sign your name next to the board member's name, put it in an envelope and send it out. Next board meeting, you're going to do the same thing. Next board meeting, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to have a stock pile of those handwritten board member thank you cards on your desk. And that is one way that you can get your board involved in that fundraising process, which remember 15% is saying thank you. Sometimes as a CEOs, we have to, I don't want to say trick, but what's another word for that, Libby?
Connive, let's see, fool.
You have to show them a different way.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ways. And because
Yeah.
again, 15% of fundraising is stewardship and saying thank you. Now imagine that feeling of the donor who opens up a thank you card and it is signed by the board member and the top C-suite executive in the organization, which is you. That is what you're doing. So if you can do that for me, that is going to change that dynamic a little bit. And you can even use that as a board education moment to talk about fundraising and the fundraising process and why you're doing this.
Yes. I am with you 1,000,000%. That is one of the best things you can do. And in fact, I heard one consultant, and I can't remember who it was, or maybe I read it in a book, who said, that's all I do for the first year with my board is I have them write thank you cards or make thank you phone calls. Because I was in a board meeting once talking about doing thank you cards. And this board member said, I will call people all day long and say thank you, but please don't ask me to write a card. I have horrible handwriting. I hate writing. I will call. And I was like, oh my God, that's fantastic, right? Because a call from a board member, how often have you gotten one of those to say thank you for a donation? I think I've gotten never a board member, but I've had a development director, call me maybe 3 times in my whole life. And, so those kinds of things are personal touches. So there's a really good question here. Is sending an email thank you okay? Here's the thing. And Sherelle, I know this is not directed to you. This is directed to all of you because we get into these habits. You can thank somebody more than once. You don't have to just thank them once. You can send them, they can get an immediate, a sort of receipt via email. Then they can get a thank you, a personalized thank you by email. Then they can get a call from a board member. Then it's okay to thank them more once. It's all warming, keeping them warmed up and feeling good about your organization. I have a couple of organizations that I make monthly recurring donations to, and I get a thank you email that's automatically generated by their system, by their donor database. But then I get a personalized email from their CEO every single month. And somebody's like, oh my God, isn't that overkill? Don't you hate that? No, it shows me that they really have their act together and makes me think that they're a well-run organization that sees me, that values me as a donor, right? So it's good to do that in different ways.
I'm
I
with
love
Libby.
this.
I don't count that automated email because
No,
it's
it's
automated.
just a receipt. It's just a
It's the
receipt.
receipt.
It's a
So we got to
yeah,
do a little bit extra.
yeah,
It
that's
sets
right.
you apart. If she's only received 3 calls, I think I've received 1, then that's the opportunity to set your organization apart.
Yeah. Let me just tell you a little vignette that inspires people. Oh, it's 26 after. Do I have time, do you think, Sabrina, to tell a little vignette? So I started at a in a fundraising position at this organization. It's a very large organization here in Columbus, Ohio, and there were 88,000 names in our donor database of people who had donated many years ago, some that were donating actively, some that hadn't donated yet at all, right? So I had to figure out where to start, with this. So what I did was I generated like a list of people who had been donating for the longest consistently. And I decided I was going to start there. And I had attended a workshop with Penelope Burke, and she told us all the things that I told you and more about what donors need. And so she challenged us and said, call one donor every morning, don't call too early, and then one donor before you leave at the end of the day. And I started doing that. I ended up getting so many return calls and thank yous, and people were excited that they got a call. But one gentleman had been a widower. His wife had died a few months before, and he called me back. I left him a voicemail the first time I called. And this was an organization that, among other things they did, had Meals on Wheels. And he was 86 years old. His wife had died, and he had never cooked. So he called me. We had this conversation. I said, what do you like most about our organization? Like, what is your favorite part of what we do? And he said, Meals on Wheels. And he said, but I'm just kind of curious about them. Like, what kind of meals do you make? Do you have like some that are kosher, some that are low salt sodium? Do you have some that are special? And I said, yes, here's what we do. We have all these different types of meals. This is how they're done. We deliver them. You can sign up for this kind. You can get frozen meals to put in your freezer for dinner because we delivered lunch, right? And he just kept asking, and I said, would you like to try one? Because I think what was happening was he was thinking he might need them. But he didn't want to say that. And I said, would you like to try one? And he said, I would. So I set up one of our drivers to drop a meal to him the next day. And I coordinated with him, and I said, this is the time it's going to be there. And then I waited about an hour, and I called him and I said, what do you think of the meal? And he said, oh, it was really good. What kind of meat was that? I wasn't sure, so we had that conversation. And so long story short, he invited me over to his house because we figured out we had something in common, and he wanted to share with me about his trips to Scotland and blah, 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 right? And he was lonely, was I think a big part of it. So I went over to his house because he invited me over. We looked at all his pictures and all that stuff, and he talked about his career. And like you, Sabrina, the day after I visited him, he called me up and said, hey, I'm going to donate some stock. How do I do that? And I said, I don't know, but let me call you right back. We had not set anything up to take stock, but we set it up really fast. And surprisingly enough, he sent $35,000 worth of stock. So this can happen with some effort, not Herculean effort, some effort. It's just got to be genuine, and it needs to be at the pace of people and what they want. And you just have to do it. You have to have those personal contacts if you want to end up with something like that. And his gift was unrestricted. It was just $35,000. That's huge, huge. It was huge for this organization. So it can happen that way. So what are you going to do between now and next week? That's my question. You made a list of things. What's one action you're going to take to warm up your donors, to cultivate people who are in your database between now and next Friday when we have the next session at 2:00 Central clock Eastern? What are
Thank
you
you.
going to do?
Think about it, man. And while you're thinking about that, we want to be respectful of your time. But here's the thing I want to say too. I want to help that person who's already putting up those roadblocks in their head, saying, well, we don't even have a CRM system. We don't have a database. Hey, I started out without a database. Everything was in Excel or in my head.
Yeah.
But you know in your head who you need to call and cultivate or start that process. And so that's what you're thinking about if you don't have a CRM system. No obstacles, no excuses.
Yes.
You can pick up the phone, you can call, you can write a thank you. What are you going to do between now and next Friday?
I love these that have come in. I love these. So I'm going to host a Zoom info session. Love that. Call previous donors and say thank you. Yes,
Yes.
yes. That's one of the best things you could do. Talk to the ED and get touch points for everyone and not just me. Love it. Find my notes for an impact report. Great.
Right.
Send a personalized update to some of our recent donors who have given for the first time. That's beautiful. Here's where we are as an organization.